We will open up Public Works, further deliberation on House Bill 25. And I would like to welcome Christopher Shea to take the committee through the work that we have before us here. Please.
Yeah, good morning, committee members. I handed out two documents. One's an updated compare sheet. Basically, the title's got in straw poll suggestions. You'll see that lines are shaded and there's notes in the first column. You also got an amendment, House Bill 25 amendment, which incorporates all those changes. And I'm going to walk you through the amendment just to point out where changes were made so that you have that before you. This is going to change after whatever your work today, but this was just to put all your decisions, potential decisions from Wednesday into a new document in the amendment format so you'd see what it would look like. Several members had indicated they wanted to see it in that fashion. So if you look at the amendment, it's 1061H. On page 1, if you go to line 13, you'll see number 3, 2 chillers for 29 Hazen Drive for $300,000. The next change that would occur would be on line 16, and that would just be a change to that total state appropriation. The number was 21,231,500. It's now, 21,231,500. Now it's 21,531,500. The next place that you made some decisions is in the Department of Education, beginning on line 22, was to decrease the Hall Street appropriation from $10.5 million to $7 million. Excuse me. And then the second decision that you made was to add the Winnisquam Regional CTE Center renovation for $7,649,663. And if you look at the comparison sheet, you'll see that the things that I'm talking about are shaded, so you can kind of follow along on both if you choose to do so. You turn to page 2, line 3. This is an adjustment to the drinking water state revolving fund state match. As you recall, the Environmental Services said it was $40,000 too high, so it was reduced down to $10,448,238. It was originally $10,488,000, so that's where the $40,000 came from. Move down to line 26, and all that changed there was the project title. So it was expanded out from life safety improvements to include parking lot, renovation, and roof. If you move to page 3, lines 9 and 10, this was a request of the Adjutant General to split this project. So as introduced by the governor, the Nashua Hazardous Material Remediation had $400,000 appropriated to it. The Adjutant General asked that you reduce that to $250,000 and then use the $150,000 to a new project of land purchase Pembroke. And that's what you see on line 10. You move down to line 36 on page 3 and line 37. Those are the freight rail appropriations. $250,000 for Carroll and Stratford and $500,000 for COAS. And what goes along with that is on the top of page 4, there's a note that requires the Department of Transportation to report to the Capital Budget Overview Committee in October and April of each year of the biennium on the status of this appropriation and the match that's required. Staying on page 4, on line 6, you'll see that you added the community college system. And on line 7, it's critical maintenance for $1.5 million. You move down to row 28. That's the bonds authorized paragraph. So because you've added or changed money, we had to adjust line 30, which is the total 235,771,073. And then we had to adjust the general fund amount. And then that will, if there's any changes to section 1 or 2 of the bill, those two numbers would be adjusted again. Moving you to page 5, line 34. So it's section 12 of the bill. That is amendment 1003H that you approved on Wednesday. That includes section 13 and 14 as well on page 6. So again, that all came from the amendment 1003H that you approved Wednesday. Line 15 is section 15 of the bill. That is amendment 1009H that you approved on Wednesday. Line 21 is section 16 of the bill, and that was amendment 1005H. And then lines 27 through 37, and then on page 7, lines 1 and 2 is all related to amendment 10020H that again you approved last Wednesday or tentatively approved. Yep, it's 1020H. On page 7, line 6, which is section 21 of the bill, that is amendment 0980H. Again, you tentatively approved that on Wednesday. Line 27, which is section 22 of the bill, was amendment 1004H. So you tentatively approved that on Wednesday, but there was a request from the committee to add some language. So if you look at the top of page 8, starting on line 1, in bold, it says appropriations contained in this paragraph must first be applied to construction renovation at the Powder Mill Fish Hatchery, and then any remaining balance shall be used for statewide hatchery construction and renovation. So as you may recall, is that there was some concern that this appropriation has been around for one biennium. It hasn't been spent at the Powder Mill Hatchery to address some of the environmental services concerns. Members were concerned that that needed to be addressed before this money should be used elsewhere. And so that sentence was added in an effort to help the committee feel comfortable with that amendment. On line 5, it's a new section, and this is section 23. It's titled Priority Project List. So on Wednesday, you talked a little bit about if the CTE appropriation for the Winnisquam isn't voted on by the members and that $7.6 million needs to be removed, you want to have your wish list or your priority list when you send this over to the Senate to say, if that money becomes available, these are the projects we want or would like you to consider funding. This is something you did similarly in the last capital budget as it related to ARPA funds coming in. So this will be amended based on any activity that you take on that today. Starting on line 8, which is section 24 of the bill, it's called lapse of prior capital balance. This is the money that you've been spending we've been calling repurposed money. So starting on line 12 of page 8, going through all of page 9 to the top of page 10, you'll see that it's A through Y. These are all the projects that had some money that they didn't spend on a project that we're going to try to repurpose that got you to that $3.8 million that you've been spending. You'll see on line 7 is an appropriation to Health and Human Services of $1.432,000 for the Glencliff wastewater treatment improvement. And then on line 10 is the $500,000 appropriation to the Connecticut Lakes Headwaters road repairs and paving. And then on line 13 is the $250,000 appropriation for the state park parking lot repairs and paving statewide. Right now, that totals $2.18 million that is appropriated. You have about $1.6 million left of the repurposed money to consider. And any of those appropriations would go in this section. And then, so that the last section is on line 23, it's section 25, and these are all the lapse extensions, and that goes to the end of the bill. And this is what Representative Jack and the subcommittee worked on earlier in the week to determine what could come in or what needed to be added and what could come out. And so all those changes have been made. There is one typo on page 20, line 25. So it should have said police hangar construction and renovation. It says reconstruction, so I will get that fixed the next time they do the amendment on this. And then the other thing that was adjusted, there was another two sections that had a spelling error. The Piscataqua River was spelled incorrectly, so in those two sections, we've gotten that corrected in this version. So those are the majority of the changes before you at this point, and happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Shea. Again, you're talking about the error for the police standards and training. Which, I assume we're talking about the bill, the amendment, which page and which line, please?
For police standards?
Yeah, right, yeah, I just missed that, what you're.
The construction, reconstruction.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yep.
Yeah, so which page and which one?
So it's page 20.
Page 20?
Yep.
Okay, of the amendment.
Yep. Page 20, line 25.
Line 25, all right.
So it
Okay,
starts police hangar construction
Okay,
and currently says reconstruction. That should say renovation to align with the line 23 above.
okay. Okay, thank you.
Representative Jack.
Thank you. There might be on the drinking water SRF. This would be page 2, line 3 of the bill. The compare report says at the end says 83, and the amendment says 38. So it would appear that the typo is in the amendment. Page 2,
Yep.
line 3 should be 283 rather than 238.
Thank you. So on that point, and that's a great segue, Representative Jack, this is a draft amendment, and if anybody notices or finds anything in here that's an error, a spelling error or something's omitted or is incorrect, please let me know so that I can confirm that it needs to be changed. Better to have multiple sets of eyes looking at something than just one set of eyes.
Yes, Representative Jack.
Thank you. And on a separate point, now that we've funded the community college with something, do we need, there's typically a paragraph that says they can spend their own money. Do we need to have that, or is that already in there?
If it's not there, we'll have it added, but I believe it's there. No, it's not. Yep.
Any other comments or questions at this point? So we have Department of Transportation's here, Community College is here. I had a request by Gino Marciano, excuse me, apologize for his last name misspelling, from the, was it Marconi? That had questions that I have passed out a response here. And then once we talk about that, then we'll open up the conversation about, expanding our list of items that we want on here. So, Assistant Commissioner, could I trouble you to come forward, please?
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name's David Rodriguez, Assistant Commissioner of DOT.
Thank you. Thank you for coming over. the, we had one of our members had a question about some other projects that we didn't speak of. And Representative Edgar, on his behalf, I'd asked you to come here today. And I believe we had some questions also after that on rail improvement projects. So would you like to start the conversation, Representative?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for following through on my request. I really appreciate it.
That's what that
And
was.
thank you, Assistant Commissioner. I contacted you today just to find out, actually, Dr. Bill Cass, but it was relative to your request that you had in the big book, and it had not been approved by the governor to be included. And the question that I had at that time was that if in fact these 3 items that you were requesting that was in the original book, that they were all highway funds. And the question I had was had that been considered in your budget? And did you have sufficient, feel you had sufficient funds on hand to be able to handle, the debt you'd require from these? That was the basic question.
Yes, thank you for your question, and I'm going to pass that on to Danielle Chardonnay, our Director of Finance.
Good morning. So yes, we have already included that in the debt service. So the first 3 items that are on that list that impact the highway fund have no further impact. It is already in the operating budget and has sailed through the governor's phase.
Thank you. And thank you again, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry, I was distracted. I apologize. So and Representative Aaron, I just want to make sure I'm heading down the right direction here. There's a project there that has interest, your interest. Which project is that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, in particular, what caused me to ask the question was that one of the particular items, the first one, construct salt and sand sheds, had the interest because of it. In my area, there's actual, hopefully a move we can make. We're trying to do something for the rails trails, and some land that is owned by you right now. You have some sheds. And that if, in fact, to be able to move them, you'd have to be able to, let's say, finally go through with the project you wanted to do on South Road, which is also, it's actually in Northampton, that if we could take those sheds down that are on the property right next to the rail trails, that you'd be able to utilize an expanded capacity on South Road in Northampton. And then we'd be able to be talking more about doing something else with that land. So that's the original reason why what prompted me to look at these particular issues in general, and just getting reminded of the fact that it's your funds, and you want to make sure that you've accounted for being able to handle that in your budget. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd be strongly supportive of, these are projects number 49, well, the one he's speaking of is 49, and then there's 50 and 51 on the agency request sheet that we got at the previous meeting. I'd be strongly supportive of it, since they've testified that they can handle this in the highway fund, and the debt service is already provided for in the budget that the finance committee is working on. I'd be strongly supportive of adding 49, 50, and 51. Those would be highway funded.
Department's point on that, please. We're not at this point that we're going to add projects. I'm here to get testimony, and then we'll come back to this.
So, thank you. And if I understand what Representative Jack is referring to, my numbering, I'm not sure if it matches, but the first one would be construct salt and sand sheds. And to Representative Edgar's point, passage of that will confirm that we have the funds to replace the Northampton salt shed. The second one would be the underground fuel tank replacement, and the third one would be the crew quarters life safety issues. And the department would certainly appreciate the opportunity to move forward with these projects in the next biennium.
Thank you. I'm not sure we're going down that list, but
Understood.
I was looking for some comment there. Any other, yes, please, Representative Newman.
Yes, just for clarification, Representative Jack, you're working off of this list, the ask list for when you get 49, 50, 51? Yes, thank you.
Okay, any further question? Thank you.
Thank you.
Would you please come forward for the community college? I think we have a question or so for you.
Good morning.
I'm sorry, introduce yourself.
I'm sorry. I'm Shannon Reed. I'm Director of Government Affairs for the Community College System of New Hampshire.
Thank you, Shan. Shannon and I had a conversation a few days back with the hope of adding either money into the community college for critical maintenance and or for the expanded programming that we spoke of. And the conversation at that point was if we could only find $1.5 million, what's the preference of the college system? And unless that's changed, it was for critical maintenance, which is what we have plugged in at this point. There's also been an ongoing conversation that many on this committee would like to see that a new program started. And we're going to talk about that here later today. Does anyone have questions? Yes, please.
Sorry, could I ask what the nature of the critical maintenance is, just the scope of what you're,
Our request encompasses a number of different projects that include roof work, boilers, rooftop units, some HVAC work primarily.
Okay. Representative Jarris.
Thank you, Chairman. So roof work, boilers, seems to be a common theme throughout the testimony of the other departments as well. Two quick ones. Is it possible the students get to see how those projects are being installed or designed? I mean, is there any benefit to the students who are working there to maybe go up and take a look? Monitor the contractors, learn from the contractors or the engineers?
That's an interesting question. It makes me wonder if you have been an educator in your professional life. I think there could be. We typically try to do that work when our campuses are as sparsely populated as possible, which tends to be during the summertime. But, I see no reason we couldn't look into that. We do have at Manchester Community College, we have a building that's dedicated to HVAC, and it was constructed, several of you have been there, it was constructed as really a learning lab. Every part of it is open to students. The systems themselves are part of what the students learn on. With the critical maintenance, I would imagine there would be opportunities for some of that to involve students.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have a follow-up?
Briefly, roofs, boilers, is there anything in the design that might include photovoltaics in there for the roofs or any heat pumps?
Our
Geothermal
critical
heating.
maintenance request really does not, at this point, involve that technology. We have submitted separately a request for federal congressionally directed funding for FY24, which I have no ability to handicap whether that would come through or not, to do large-scale solar installations at all of our campuses to help, reduce or alter our energy consumption. But the critical maintenance is really fixing failing roofs. making sure that there's no additional damage to buildings from those types of things.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Yes, Representative Abbott.
Yes, just had a question on your request for the respiratory therapy program for teaching equipment and teaching space renovation. At present, do you offer a program on respiratory therapy?
Presently, not at Nashua Community College. Presently, River Valley Community College in Claremont offers a respiratory therapy program. In conversations with healthcare providers in the southern tier of New Hampshire, it became clear that there was a real demand in that part of the state for graduates of respiratory therapy programs. Our plan, if the NCC project is funded, is to create the respiratory therapy labs and basically import the River Valley Community College program to be offered in Nashua. Doing it that way avoids having to kind of create a new program from whole cloth and go through all the hoops that one jumps through when one creates a new program. We basically use the River Valley program, but just deliver it at Nashua. Does that answer your question? Thank you.
Yes, Representative Jack.
Thank you. Following up on my colleague from Nashua's question, the community college presentation identified $3.425 million in critical maintenance. So what we're doing with this appropriation is helping them with that amount rather than covering it.
I would just like to, and I'm sure it's already being done by the system, and I understand the representative's question. I like the question, and I also fully understand that you need to do this when campus is not there. Do you ever give a shout out for the state for this money and some, I'll take you back to elementary school, poster board saying that these projects were done on behalf of the school for, from the state?
Excuse me. On major,
Does it go in a press release? How does someone there who's paying a higher tuition than other states come to realize that there is actually help coming from the state?
on major renovations where new space is created, I think we do routinely do something like that. For maintenance, as far as I know, we really haven't, but I think that that's a very good idea. I think it's important that students understand that the state is supporting their education in a number of different ways. I know in New Hampshire, there's a refrain that we hear that New Hampshire is 50th out of 50 in state support for public education. We don't like the message that sends to students because New Hampshire actually supports education in ways that may be more innovative, more nimble than other states are able to do, and we appreciate that. I think that anything we can do to deliver that message to students is something that we should do.
Thank you. And if you could just copy the committee in when you come up with some sort of press release to that effect, we'd be appreciative. If you need a picture of this good-looking group, we can do that too. Anything else at this point? Yes, Representative Eaton.
Shannon, I just need a follow-up. On the respiratory therapy, if you get that money, does it mean the program operates exclusively out of Nashua and River Valley discontinues, or you're just going to copy River Valley?
The program would continue at both locations.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for making that clear to me also. All right, any other questions, Shannon? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, let's start in. So, as I understand it, we have $1.6 million left, and there's another 108,000 on the other items that we added with 108,000 left. We'll start with that. I had a conversation with Chris about if we had In past, we've added monies to that and put other monies in the second part of this, which becomes confusing to people and departments going forward. So I think we're going to try and keep the two items separate. Yes, Representative Mills.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to follow up on Representative Jack's proposal last week on items on our wish list, our agency request wish lists, items 45, 46, and 47 for DOT, which are repairs to railroad bridges on state-owned active railroad lines, culverts on state-owned lines, ties and installations. There's 3 separate items, and that comes up to a total of 1.67, which I think will certainly tap our repurpose balancing.
Okay, does everyone have that sheet that Representative Mills is referring to?
We had it from last week. It's agency requests dated 3/14/2023. It was the wish list that didn't make the big book.
And would you repeat those line number? It was 45,
45, 46, and 47.
Are you making that as a motion, Representative?
I'm just tossing it out there for discussion to see if
Okay.
whether we have any other pressing
Okay.
projects.
Okay. The further discussion? Yes, please.
The question I have is, on the aviation grant management software. That's going to the airports and stuff.
Okay.
As has been televised through the news of late, at our bigger airports and stuff, they have software issues that have created safety issues and stuff like that. And my curiosity is, on some of these smaller airports that operate, will not upgrading this software create other issues down the line for these smaller, less controlled environments that are being used? Like in, for instance, the Laconia Guilford Airport is a high-volume jet airport, and they rely on software and stuff to keep them functioning because they don't have a control tower. So I'm just curious if that would undermine that by not keeping the software upgraded or not. It's more of a question than.
And where in our volumes here, where would I find that item? Thank you.
48.
Yes, Representative Jack.
Yeah. Unless Mr. Shea wants to cover this, I can shed some light on this. This line would be for software to be used by the Bureau of Aeronautics at the Department of Transportation to manage the grants that are given to airports, rather than money that would actually be spent at the airport to upgrade their software. We have 25 airports in the state. Some of them are federal eligible. About, I think it's 12 are federal eligible and 13 are not. The 13 that are not, they fund their own repairs. They're typically smaller airports. The federal eligible, we're on what's called the Federal Block Grant Program, which means that the Department of Transportation administers the federal funds that are flowing through to the airports to do projects. And this software would help the Bureau of Aeronautics do that work.
Okay. Chris, did you have anything else to add to that?
Not to that specifically. I just wanted to circle back to the Representative Mills suggestion or
Yes.
comment. So if we do those three lines, 45 through 47, I would suggest that you reduce maybe line 46 by $25,000 to fit into the repurpose, what's left of that repurpose appropriation. If you do that, you would spend all but $3,000 of the repurpose money.
I'm receptive to that.
And I believe the department would be okay with that. I think some of these were a little bit scalable, so that I think they would be fine. And they might be nodding hopefully behind me
Okay.
and not giving me dirty looks.
Yes, Representative Faulkner and then Eaton.
Thank you. I remember the Representatives Kaczynski and Newton had concerns about money being spent on railroad lines owned by Boston Sand and Gravel, their subsidiary railroad. Could we describe where this money would go, and is that different from and locations that were brought up by the representatives? And
Certainly, I think we should explore it. Assistant Commissioner, please. I believe what we're looking for is some sort of explanation on these three items on state-owned 45, 46, 47. Do you have that before you, sir? I do. Okay, please.
I do, thank you. And just total clarity, this is beyond my area of expertise. So I will answer based on the material that we have in the documents before us. And specifically, all three of these items mentioned state-owned active railroad lines. So they would be spent on state-owned rail lines, not privately owned rail lines.
And privately owned airlines would be like the
Rail lines.
scenic component. Because Boston Sand and Gravel and the other line operating through Ossipee, those are still state-owned rail beds. Am I correct?
I would need to confirm that. That's, I'm not familiar with which railways are state-owned and which are privately owned. I apologize.
Okay. But these items that are shown are items of importance to your department, I would certainly think.
Absolutely, yes.
And I'm not, and just for my own point, I'm not opposed to more care being done and hopefully before the fact than having an issue with freight. Yeah, befalling our state has happened in others. So, any further question? Yes, Representative Jack.
Thank you. On that bulletin board there's a map of all the rail lines in the state, and it clearly calls out which are state-owned active, state-owned inactive, and the other ones that are privately owned. And so you can see on which miles of railroad these funds would be expended.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Further questions? Yes, Representative Mills.
Yeah, I just want to apologize to Mr. Shea because when I originally came up with that figure, I failed to notice that the culverts were at $550,000. So I thought I was well under that. So thank you very much for catching that.
All right. Representative Eaton.
Do you have any idea of what we charge for fees or what reimbursements are for use of the state-owned rails?
I do not. No, I'm sorry.
And further, so you wouldn't have any idea when they were last updated or changed?
When the ties were last updated and
No,
changed?
what
When the
are-
fees? I do not, no.
Could you possibly speak to the railroad aeronautic, your director, and come back with that?
Absolutely. So, my position as Assistant Commissioner is responsible for the divisions of project development and operations. Assistant or Deputy Commissioner Briere, who's been with us in the past, is much more familiar with these areas, and of course, Commissioner Cass is as well.
Sounds good. If it's possible for them to get back to us today, we'd sincerely appreciate it.
We will do that.
Thank you. Further questions?
Just brief, thank you,
Yes,
thank you,
Representative
Chairman. Deputy Commissioner, looking at on these lines, the culverts and the bridges, if those aren't maintained properly, flooding could occur in the area around that line. And certainly the bridge, there could be issues on a roadway intersecting the railroad bridge or going underneath it, et cetera. Is it fair to say that this is part of the importance too? It's not just for the rail line and maybe avoiding issues with delays on those rail systems or possible derailments, that these projects have additional localized importance.
That's absolutely true.
Thank you.
So keeping those bridges open is critical.
Got it. Thank you, Chairman.
So, for the new members, that would be a would you believe question as opposed to a question. So there have been some chairmen that get very disturbed on those. You have one that is not. So, all right. Thank you once
Thank
again.
you.
Yes, Representative Eaton.
So since we're doing Sophie's Choice,
Yep.
I would like to go back to the community college respiratory therapy program. The dollar factor seems to sit quite perfectly there. The advantage point is if you're doing respiratory therapy, physical therapy, anything along those lines, it provides a distinct increase in enrollment into the institution, which can also lead into other classes at the institutions. But it's instant job placement, I think a majority of which usually stays within the state of New Hampshire and is an advantage to our entire workforce, tax structure, everything across the board. The spill out to so many different areas of running these programs and what the students provide and do is probably too numerous to count here today, but that would be my suggestion for the alleged surplus funds if we're going to do Sophie's Choice.
Thank you. Further discussion? Representative Jack.
Thank you. I would just point out for discussion's sake that the committee has the option. Right now, we're at 129.8 million of general fund bonding. The committee has the option to do both and increase the general fund bonding by whatever it takes to cover it. That is a discussion we could have without suggesting whether that's a good or a bad idea.
Okay, thank you. Representative Mills.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd also like to point out that we did put $1.5 million already to CTE for that program, and they opted to put it into critical maintenance instead. I would be very amenable to taking another 1.5 million if the Winnisquam deal falls through, as making that our top priority. But right now, we've already given CTE 1.5 million, and they've opted to put it to critical maintenance instead of their therapy program.
Community college.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
I'm getting confused. So anyway, so I would opt to make that a priority for the Winnisquam money if it falls through, and to still leave to try and distribute the excess money appropriately in between all these different departments, to leave the 1.5 million at the excess at rail. Thank you.
Representative Newman.
Yes. Thank you. Representative Eaton, Sophie's Choice, that's a good characteristic, or open mic, I guess. I don't know. Which one is better? I'd like to throw out for consideration, excuse me, some money for the Department of Corrections for their planning for a new men's prison. I think I saw in the big book, they originally had 50,000, they got it to 40 was in there, and in the blue book here, when this came through, 2,500 they are looking for, which is a pittance of what they will need ultimately for planning. But what what kind of jumped out at me was a little bit of easy research last night, and I found an article that was published through Google, well, blah, blah. Public Radio did it, and the article was from 2019 in the broadcast, and they referenced a report from 2018, and this is about the ceiling leaks in the prison. And I'll read the quote. "The ceiling, in fact, has leaked for probably the past 10 to 15 years. There are tarps installed to divert the leaking water to collection buckets," reads the report from September 2018. So where I'm going with this is, I don't think anybody disputes that a new prison is needed. In very casual conversations with a few members from finance, I think they're struggling with trying to find funding also. And so it's a thing. And then I remembered what Honorable John Graham said the other day, that you do have room to go before you do upset or impact. That might have been from a roofer, I'm not sure. So there's some money to go to until you start really impacting the bond limit. But I also had read that if you start getting a lawsuit that forces you to legislate a new prison and fund it, no matter what you have to do, that affects your bond rating also. So I see this as a necessary thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Eaton.
I think we probably need some chats down the hallway. I had lunch with the chair of Division 1 on yesterday, and my understanding is they do have money in the operating budget, upwards of around 10 million, Mr. Shea, to deal with this. So it would, 10 million bucks is going to do a lot more than 2,500 out of us.
Okay, I could follow up.
Yes, you can, but I would just, before we go there, I have had similar conversations in that the request from the governor was $50 million. And when the finance came in with a shortfall in the forecast, they downgraded it to $10 million to start the process and get the planning in order. And then it's going to become a very big decision for the legislature going forward where we're going to find that money. We've done that before, you know, it's a much bigger number. It needs to be done, but I feel satisfied at this point in time that needs being taken care of. So please follow up.
I don't know what to say. I've had conversations with different people than you have. I trust your people and I hope they do it. Thank you.
Yeah. If it doesn't come, if it somehow doesn't, it's going to come. That money's going to come through, whether it's here or through the Senate. And my understanding is it's coming out of this House proposal. Further comment? All right, so let's have a discussion on this monies and what we're going to purpose these monies for. And I would, and we're back to the straw poll idea here. If we need to go through this further, we will. Are you waiting to speak? Okay. And I will put forward first Representative Mills' idea to use our surplus that we have right now for items 45, 46, and 47. And one of those, I believe, will be adjusted back by, was it $25,000, which would essentially take us out of a surplus on those lines. And Representative Mills' follow-up item was that we would put into the community college as item number 1 when we're looking at the possible funding that may come back if Winnisquam doesn't come to terms at their school board meeting. That is our number one priority. So I guess if you're in favor of that, you would raise your hand, straw poll only at this time. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I showed 12, and those opposed, 12 to 1. I'm sorry? No. Vote first. Okay, so for planning purposes, Chris, if you could make that adjustment for us. And let's turn the discussion now over to in the event, and I hope this doesn't come to be, but in the event that Winnisquam doesn't pull forward, we are looking at a number of 7,649,633 as I have it. And we are committing 150,000 of that to the community college. 1.5 million. What is the pleasure of the committee? Yes, Representative Faulkner.
And I suggest that since we're taking it out of one sort of educational program, that we in fact fully fund the critical maintenance and the pulmonary program for community colleges out of that, out of that contingency. So that would be an extra 1.9 million for the critical maintenance and the 1.5.
I'd second that.
Representative Jack.
Looking at the famous sheet here, if you were to do lines 12, 13, and there's a line 13 for IT infrastructure upgrades. So if we were to fully fund lines 12, 13, and 14, that would be in the spirit of keeping it in education, and that would be a good use of some of those funds.
Let me just get back to that, please.
So that'll be 3.6 million over what we've already put aside.
Well,
That would be
we
4.6
brought
million.
over,
4.6.
So Representative Faulkner's suggestion is to bring in the rest of, it was at 3,425,000. We funded 1.5, so the balance of that you're suggesting to bring over. That's right.
In addition to the
And
respiratory therapy program.
respiratory therapy, we were putting that in, so that's fine.
So you're at 3.4.
Yes, Representative Mills.
Mr. Chair, in keeping with this entire committee's soft spots, I guess you call it, besides education, I'd also go to the Natural Cultural Resources Department and then go ahead and fully fund the Connecticut Lakes Headwaters road repairs and paving, bumping that up from the, what was it,
I think we put 500,000.
500,000? We could either put,
We could
we could
fund that.
we could
I'm with
fund
that.
We could fund that fully.
So we're going to need to run some numbers here. And can we go backwards? I just want to go back to the community college system. Representative Faulkner, was your suggestion also to bring in IT infrastructure?
I
upgrade?
hadn't suggested
I
that.
didn't
but
think that was
I
part of it.
think Representative Jack added that in when you went through the numbers, but
Representative McConkey, just for the record, when the department came in, they presented the IT infrastructure and the critical maintenance as a single critical maintenance request. I took the detail of their request and broke out the IT piece versus the critical, what would be the roofs and other HVAC and things like that, to give you the two separate numbers. But I just wanted to be clear that when they presented critical maintenance, it did
That
include
was
the
part
IT
of that.
piece.
so.
Yes,
follow up.
Representative Faulkner.
So we're going to put in language so that the college system has the flexibility to spend it where needed. Isn't that correct? Is that?
whether it be critical maintenance or infrastructure
You're saying
upgrades.
if they had it as part of the same request, that I would say that they can decide how,
Could
much for
I,
infrastructure?
does everyone remember what the infrastructure upgrades were for IT? I'm just suggesting that maybe we hold that back and make that language, and then if we have it, we'll bring it back in.
You have it, Shannon?
If you would, Chen, you could just go ahead.
I think I'll start, and then if she needs to jump in, I guess. So the IT infrastructure upgrades included hardware upgrades to replace equipment at end of life for 750,000, and then life cycle replacement of switches, network gear, and UPS. That was the detail that I had. I don't know if Shannon has additional.
And for someone that relies on the rest of my family for my advice on computers, someone want to tell me what IT infrastructure is, please?
What we mean by that, Mr. Chairman, we have 7 colleges within the community college system of New Hampshire, and all rely on a shared central kind of IT infrastructure, which is everything from the hardware, the servers and the blades, and I am kind of the narrative that we put into our presentation here is about the extent of my IT knowledge, to be honest. But it's the what allows us to run our databases, what allows us to run all of our building systems, what allows us to deliver online education. All of that is supported centrally by the community college system, and that is what this request supports.
If we don't get to entirely funding that, and our request was to come through to make up the balance of item number 12, which was 3.425, which we're already proposing half of that, then the college could make a decision on where they wanted to spend those funds.
Yes, and we would appreciate that flexibility and the additional investment that would be deeply helpful.
Thank you. Is that okay for now? And then we'll see where we go. Yes, Representative Bogert.
Point of clarification on that, when we say they could use the money as they will, as far as it is under the maintenance, or just generally use it as needed?
No, the suggestion, and if I understand correctly, line 13 was broken out of line 12 by Chris to show the difference between those two. And if we were to go down that road, we would develop language that said the monies could only be used for critical maintenance and or infrastructure upgrades.
Thank you.
Yeah, we've had issues in the past when we've given too much carte blanche. Yes, Representative Jost.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In my view, the IT upgrades, especially to the common data centers, in my view, is critical.
Thank you. All right, so why don't we, let's put a pencil to where we are right now. And guess that'd be, are you there? So I'm suggesting that we are potential funding the respiratory program, which was their item 15, or excuse me,
14.
item 14. That we are going to add another, whatever the balance is from 3,425,000 less the 1.5 million. What else did we have?
I had Connecticut Lakes for $1 million.
Connecticut Lakes, yes, to finish funding that out to the original request.
So that would bring you down to $3.2 million left to appropriate from that CTE appropriation.
Okay. Yes, Representative Jack.
There's an item for, under Administrative Services, number 4, for $3 million of statewide parking lot repairs and paving. That could be added as the last priority and would use most of that.
Scalable project. I see where you are. Are there any other suggestions before we?
Yeah.
Yes, please, Representative Eaton.
I'm always looking for return on investment. And line 26, the Liquor Commission computer software point of sale system. They did do an upgrade, I think 4 years ago, and they did it on the cheap. They had the bells and whistles system laid out. The point of sale system was actually going to be able to push advertisements onto people's smartphones if they were within a certain range of sales or different items going on. It was also going to accelerate the way they do the sales at the register and improve inventory alignments. Anyway, that might give a return on the investment versus everything else. For the parking is nice to have, but isn't necessarily going to do what you want.
Chris, please.
That would be funded with liquor funds, so
Right.
it wouldn't touch the CTE money that you're trying to not repurpose, but have your wish list for. So I just want to make sure it's
Okay.
clear that I'm not saying that your suggestion's not a valid suggestion to the committee. I just want to be clear that if the committee acts on that, it's not going to change the $3.2 million that you're trying to prioritize with a wish list.
Chris, do you remember why? Because that's coming through their fund, their dedicated fund,
Enterprise
isn't it?
fund.
The enterprise fund.
Yes.
So
And
did they say that they had the funds to?
already built into their debt service and their operating budget, similar to what DOT had done with the projects they presented today. So it wouldn't cost, there's no add to the operating budget in addition to what they've been proposed through the governor and through the House division so far.
So we could bring that back in without peril, couldn't we? But not in here.
That's correct.
Okay, let's do that. Does anyone have any objection to not doing that? I'm sorry that we missed that before because
was wondering.
we had other. All right, so we'll do that. We have 3.2. Do you want to take a break for 10 minutes? Let's.
3.2 remaining.
Right, it would take, so your suggestion, Ms. Faulkner, would be to bring in the IT money now at this point and reduce it from that number for the community college? I haven't brought over that 1.2 million.
Right, so
Well, we're stopping on the parking lot repairs, and it is a scalable project. Yeah, okay. I'm sorry, I'm missing the point.
I didn't know if we had disposed of the question of whether we should add money to the parking lot repairs. Or whether that was still something that we were discussing as using that 3.2 million.
Well, we're discussing it. Do you want to
No,
discuss that point?
I-
Yes,
I have no
Representative
objection to
Nelson.
I just wanted to point out that the parking lot repair, paving, that figure is scalable, so we don't have to give them the entire $3 million. We can find other things that we can fund fully, and then whatever is left, if we'd like to, that's a poor way of putting it. But we don't have to give them the full $3 million for that.
Right, Faulkner?
Well, so I would suggest that we add $2 million to the parking lot repairs and then fully fund the community college
Community
request.
college? Okay. Yes, Representative Newman.
Just a question. I just want to make sure I understand. This discussion is talking about in the event that Winnisquam does not go into their CTE pro. Okay, thank you.
Further discussion? Yes.
Mr. Chairman, at this time, do you want to talk about the additional requests from Gino?
Um,
That's all operating budget?
yeah, I want to, let's follow up on that because I meant to talk about that. So let's discuss that. So Gino had reached out and had noticed as of late that some of his projects were not included in the governor's budget that he thought were critical to his operation. I reached out to the budget director from the governor and spoke to him about that. And this letter that was distributed to you folks talking about the Harbor Dredging Pier and Maintenance Fund established, I believe it's the impression that there are funds sufficient there under oversight by the state to fund his needs. So I wasn't going to make any motion to bring that forward unless you would like to. But it is under operating funds. And capital budget overview, Mike or Chris, that's where that comes through.
To use the pier maintenance money?
Yes.
Yes, they have the authority to come capital budget overview with requests.
And you're having sat on and off of there over the years, we're always questioning how large that fund is and what's being used, and it's under regular review. And to the times I've been on that board committee, it's always been permitted. Yes, go right ahead.
Thank you. It seems at different times we do fund dredging, like at the we did in Rye and Hampton, so that I guess at times, we do that, and also with the turning basin. I don't know how big their dredging fund is. But I know they always seem to be dipping into it or asking for some help somehow. But okay, thank you.
Yeah, and it was also relayed that there are more federal funding possibilities out there to help them with that project. So there wasn't a concern from the governor's office that we didn't have sufficient funding. Representative Mills.
Okay, I want to go over something now, and with Mr. Shea's approval on this, this is what I've come up with. If we go to the community college system right now, their line item for respiratory therapy, and forget the titles, just pay attention to the dollar figures, is 1.5 million, which we have already allocated to them. So their leftover needs are critical maintenance and IT infrastructure, which is $4.625 million. In addition to that, we've tentatively agreed to put in $1 million towards the Natural Cultural Resources Connecticut Lakes headquarters for a total of $5.625 million. So that's where we are, and we've also discussed parking lot repairs, giving them some money. Not a dollar figure yet, but at this point in time, Mr. Shea, I've got 5.625 that we've come up with.
That's correct.
Thank you. Just wanted to be on the same page at this point in time with dollars. And Liquor Commission is off the table because that's an enterprise fund.
But we're able to bring it back in. As an-
Definitely, the committee can vote to do that project. It's not going to
Yeah.
count against your general fund debt limit, or against the repurposing of the CTE money if that needs to happen.
Yeah, I would want to bring that in. So our balance now is at what?
It's you have just over 2 million, and I think Representative Faulkner had suggested that you could use that DAS scalable money to make up the difference if the committee had that desire, but you may have other options that you want to consider.
What's the pleasure of the committee? Are we amicable to putting the rest in? Representative Cloutier?
Yes, a question again. This is on the wish list, is that correct?
Correct.
Correct.
And again, Representative Mills, could you repeat the total figure that you reached? I'm still trying to follow the debate here.
At this point, we're at $5.625 million.
So 5.2.
$5,625,000.
Okay, and that would be on the wish list, is that correct?
That's off of the wish list, and this is if Winnisquam falls through on the vote.
Okay, thank you.
Further discussion before I go to straw poll? Yes, Representative Newell.
Yes. And apologies, Mr. Chairman, I'm not trying to beat a dead horse. I just want to ask you again, you are somewhat confident that some planning money for for a new prison will be available?
Yes, and I had a friend that told me we can always beat a dead horse, so don't worry. So, and if this wouldn't be the vehicle if that money had to be found anyway. So, because
I see that. I had
yeah.
just seen the request that came through ours
Yeah.
for the 2 million. Thank you.
Yeah, my understanding is we're perfectly fine there. Yes, Representative Bogert.
Just to clarify, if the Winnisquam CTE project doesn't get approved and it keeps saying the floor, is that the floor of the legislature by vote, or is that the ballot that's going forth locally for them to approve the 10.2 million? that was
To
offered?
approve their portion of that fund.
Okay, thank you.
My understanding is it lost by 6 or 8 votes last time. And they've worked extremely hard trying to get consensus in the community. They've had almost, I was told by the director, they've been holding public education on this, and there's still another one this week, and the vote is on the 27th. So our wish list may be for naught, and it's our hope that that does become the case. But if for some reason it doesn't, here's where we want those items to go.
Does that require a 60% vote of the populace? Is that what they're looking for?
That's my understanding.
Those are often tough to.
Representative Jack.
Yeah, thank you. Most of the time that they will choose to fund that with bonding, which is a supermajority. I would also point out that by the time House Bill 25 comes to the floor, they will presumably have taken that vote, so we will know the answer before it comes to the floor.
Chris?
And just to make sure that everybody understands, the wish list that you're putting forward wouldn't replace the CTE project as passed by the House. What you're doing is you're letting the Senate know when they get House Bill 25, if the CTE project isn't approved locally, that this is your priority. This is the House position that you'd want to take those funds and move them into these wish list areas. It doesn't bind the Senate to do that in any way. The Senate would make its own choices. But when you came to a committee of conference, you'd be able to point back to this and say, this was one of our highest priorities, and this, we let you know that, so can we negotiate around that versus not having anything in writing?
Representative Eaton.
So we've gone through a tentative wish list. Now that we're at that point, I'd like to circle back to Representative Jack's comment when we started, which is the state treasurer comes in and gives you a number that we try to backfill. The state treasurer, by design, by history, everyone we've ever had always does a low ball to feel excessively comfortable. And this committee, numerous times over history, has decided that the priorities were greater than what the number the state treasurer gave. And if you took what we've approved so far minus the paving, you're under a 5%, I think a 4% something increase over what the state treasurer gave you as a total. And this committee could easily fund everything in that wish list and not do anything that would make anyone scream over the capital budget bonding.
In my terms, and I believe you've been here the same or if not more, we had one time, we have done that on several occasions.
Yep.
On other times, we have stayed with our number.
Just for the committee's information, if you look at the compare sheet that I gave you earlier, if you turn to page 5 and you go to row 147, and you're going to see a number of 129 million. That's where you're at right now. The governor was at 129,875,637. Based on what I gave you, the amendment this morning, you were at 129,766,701. So you're just slightly under what the governor's proposed. But to Representative Eaton's point, if you were to add any of this wish list, it would take you over the $130 million mark. And I just wanted to put that out there for the committee so you understand where you are.
And I fully understand, and I'm sure most of the committee does on that. And to Representative Eaton's point, 5-7 million does not break does not get the nerves. I just my only hesitation on this is that there is so much that finance is dealing with and what they had to cut out that I don't know whether it should be us that makes that push or whether it's them, and what that wish list is going to look like to make up for some of the shortfalls that we have been talking about. We looked at it back and forth how to do this, whether we would just fund everything we wanted and then put the second community or the second career technical school off to the side, and we decided we'd go this way. So let's finish up on where we are, and then we're going to come back to that.
Okay.
And I'm probably going to take a break for 10 minutes, and then we'll come back to that. So what the pleasure of the committee on the items, which basically expends where we are in using the balance for parking lot repairs and replacement, which was the last item we spoke of. If you're in favor of that, and if you need more explanation, we can do it now. But if you're in favor of that, which essentially takes our balance to near zero, signified by raising your hand. Thank you. All right, so so we're to that point. If we could take 10 minutes, and then we will continue. Caution anyone in the room that probably
If you look at this, that's
All right, let's come back from our extended break here. Some committee members, I don't know if you're aware, and I'm sure the gentleman won't have an issue. I'm hoping not. Representative Connor, on his way in on Wednesday, had a car accident and totaled his car. My last conversation with him was that he was personally fine, but that's why he hasn't been here. And if you're listening on the broadcast, we wish you best, and if you can get back to me on your health at this point. All right, so we started a conversation earlier by Representative Egger about wanting to bring in 3 highway projects. And I'm going to turn the conversation over to Representative Egger to tell you what those projects are. These are highway funds. The department will speak to the point, but it won't affect our bonding ability on our total budget here. They're needed items, and I don't see a problem with bringing them in here. It's sort of like how we just discovered on the Liquor Commission, which of course is the enterprise fund, but it won't have an issue on us, and I turn to Representative Egger to discuss that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, the items that I'd like to bring forth were 3 of the items that the Transportation Department had put in for, but we haven't considered yet. They were not, they were submitted to the governor, but it wasn't of the ones that he had approved. And again, I guess I want to emphasize that these are the highway funds. They're not coming out of the general fund. They've already have it in their budget to handle the costs. The first one is the statewide construct salt and sand sheds. And we're familiar with the requests for these over the years. They're always trying to fix the ones that they have, and they have so many of them that they try to do so many every couple of years. And that amount was for $2.5 million. The second one was underground fuel storage tank replacement. They still have a lot of underground storage tanks, and they're going about replacing them, before they have a problem. They have a regular schedule for it, so I believe we want to keep up doing that so that we don't have a problem, and it's a lot more expensive if you do have a problem with them. And they're replacing them with the double wall tanks, and they have monitor stuff with them, so we can actually tell if there's a problem. And I think, and again, that was for $2.5 million. And the last one is for the statewide crew quarters. If you look at some of the pictures that they provided in the handout that they gave us, some of the places that they have right now are ones that we might not want to sleep in a lot, and they have the situations that the crews are working overnight in these snowstorms and other times, and they really have to stay there. And so we have to just to try to make it better for the crew people that are working for us, and so that they can be safer when they're out on the road and everything. So they're continually trying to upgrade their crew quarters. They have a lot of work to do, and they have a request right now in for $5 million. So that's a total of $10 million against the highway fund, and I hope the committee will consider it. Thank you.
Yes, Representative Bogert.
Would that be items 49, 50, and 51 that we're talking about? Because item 49 for the salt and sheds is $2,017,000, not $2,500,000. Is that correct?
I'm going by their original request.
Okay.
So if the latter, the one that you just mentioned is more appropriate, then that's trying to go by what this information I had, not this. I probably should have gone by what you have right in front of you, which is the list of additional agency requests.
Yes, and Representative, I mean, that's, Edgar, that is the numbers that you just provided, going off the additional agency request?
I actually went off of the original request, sorry, so
Okay.
if I could check with the department, if, which one is the one that you really requested now?
Representative Mills, do you want to say something for,
Yeah.
bring forward?
I believe what Representative Edgar was talking about was lines 49, 50, and 51. Our figures are currently, the requests are for $2,017,500 for the salt and sand sheds. I'm only going to say that once. The underground fuel tank replacement was $2 million, and the statewide crew quarters was $5 million, for a total of $9,017,500.
Chris?
No, that confirms what the agency submitted, and they're still okay with that number.
Okay.
It's in the book that they provided you when they came before you. I know the original request might have been something different.
I could read the original request better, so
No,
I
that's
I
fine.
use that
That's
one.
fine.
So my question to you, Chris, is if we're about to straw poll this, if we bring these items in, this $9 million plus dollars, that does not affect our bond that we're going to pass out of here under general funds?
It does not, because the highway funds would pay that portion.
Okay.
And the agency has testified that they've accounted for these projects in their debt service line in their operating budget, and to date, that hasn't been removed.
Okay. So that's fine. I'd just like to make one on item 51, statewide crew quarters. I had visited several with Executive Counselor Kenny over the last 3 years, and this item keeps coming up, and life safety issues and everything else. And then for the crews that have no other choice because they don't know when it's going to stop snowing, have to have a place to sleep. They'd been using wood stoves and things that they can't use anymore. We have hiring issues everywhere in the state. But every crew member that I ever spoke to always talked about the importance of this. So strongly support that. The other two go without saying. So if you're in favor of straw poll of adding lines 49, 50, and 51 off the additional agency request, signify by raising your hand. We show unanimous. Thank you. I'd like to go back to Representative Eaton. Perhaps you would like to, we spoke about it and adding the $1,500,000 for the computer software for the Liquor Commission, but I never brought that to a vote. Perhaps you'd like to motion that.
Mr. Chair, I'd move the $1 million for the point of sale system, computer software under the enterprise funds.
1,000,005 or 1 million?
Yep. That would be line 26.
Okay, 1,500,000. If you're in favor of that, again, that's not, that's a separate fund, enterprise fund. Signify by raising your hand. And we show that we are unanimous in that.
And Mr. Chair, before the transportation folks leave, possible to ask one last question?
Please.
Mr. Cass, I know you're doing cleanup at this point, but how is your team holding up and how did you survive the avalanche, since I'm in an area where we got the jackpot?
Dave, you can chime in. So I think most of the state did pretty well. By Tuesday morning, things were black and wet. The southwest area still had a lot of trees down, power lines down. I know they were still busy all day Tuesday cleaning up, but I think you probably saw it coming in today. They've got on top of it. It was definitely a lot of it was a long couple of nights and a lot of challenges over there with the amount of snow they had got, and some of the traffic and truck
jackknives and accidents and stuff, but, yeah, so I think I think very, very, you know, even with the amount of snow to have it turned around in a matter of a day, I think they did an exemplary work keeping on top of everything, so.
And your crews are doing okay?
They are, yeah. They're tired, but I think they're resting today and stuff. Dave, do you have any other more recent reports? We talked to the district engineer Tuesday morning, and you know, they were still out clearing up some of the trees down and wires down, but I think people were, you know, holding up. Anything more, Dave? Yeah? No? Oh,
And
go ahead.
Mr. Chair, if you would concur, I would ask that on behalf of you and the committee, that Mr. Cass extends his thanks and gratitude for a hard fight for the last several days.
Certainly.
Great. No, I appreciate that. I certainly will. I'll be glad to have that recognition.
And perhaps you don't have the answer now that, let's say it stops snowing tomorrow and we stop having ice events. How are you in your winter maintenance budget overall?
We have a item going for Governor Council next week for about another $6 million transfer. We are overexpended in some line items, primarily salt and the hired equipment that we are paying right now out of some other lines until they can be backfilled. We need to review, typically Friday when we get the payroll and stuff, we'll be making sure that that $6 million transfer for winter maintenance is adequate to with the amount of expenditures from the last storm. But yeah, so we had about a month and a half ago had done a $3.5 million transfer, and then we had a long week of storms, the very end of February, beginning of March, and this past storm had a lot of time and overtime. But so we'll be looking at those numbers. But yeah.
Okay.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, could I have
Yes.
one quick question to Commissioners? Thank you. Will this be from the general fund, these transfers you have asked for?
No, the transfers are from the highway fund.
Highway fund.
Unrestricted, from the
Okay.
highway fund surplus.
Oh, sir, highway fund surplus. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And Turnpike, I should say. There's about $1 million of that transfer is also in relative to the Turnpike system, and that's out of the Turnpike fund.
Representative Jarrus?
Just brief, thank you, Chairman. Just briefly, Commissioner, is there anything different about this year compared to last year? Is it the trees? That, in
I
terms
think
of asking for
every
the,
storm is different. What's different this year compared to last year, and why some of the is that inflation costs are up. So, you know, we had our budget based on cost of salt and stuff from 2020, 2021. We've seen a lot of material cost escalation. That's a big part of driving some of the you know, funds requests. So I think, you know, as we're tracking, we're seeing average winter or maybe slightly more average usage, but because the cost of the commodities has increased, we're seeing higher than average cost.
thank you. And best to the crews. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you. All right, I think we can now excuse you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming over. All right, we're going to switch gears here a little. Representative Eaton had brought up a conversation earlier that we were presented by the treasurer a number that has been very closely aligned with what we've been given in past years on our goal of what to spend, which was 100 and what was our number we were.
So when the treasurer comes before you with her debt affordability study, she does that at 120 million. Right now, the decisions you've made is at 129 million, which is in line with what the governor had done. I believe you've heard from the treasurer if not recently, you have heard it in the past that going up above 130 by a few $1,000,000 isn't necessarily going to change that debt affordability number by very much. It might be a couple tenths of a point, but it's not going to put it up in the area where they would be concerned. The other thing I would just note is that the decision on how much you bond is your decision. The treasurer doesn't tell you or limit that. She just comes in and provides advice on what the impact might be.
Thank you. In past capital budgets coming out of here, there have been several times that, if not more than that, after we have listened to the budget requests from all the departments and that we've come to a conclusion that it would be to the benefit of the state that we would go above that recommended threshold by the treasurer. It's ultimately our decision. What I'm going to propose is that after all that hard work we had to find out where we would possibly spend $7 million, it's going to be my recommendation now that we roll those out of the wish list and bring them into the capital budget, increasing our capital budget request by that $7 million. There's more to that, but, and in the event Winnisquam were not to be funded, then our request, then that bonding would drop by that $7 million also. So the treasurer has said in the past, if you move the needle 5, 7, even 10, that's probably not an issue. But when you start kicking out beyond that point, and especially it's somewhere around the $20 million figure, that it could cause concern. And so at this point in time, is there any discussion on talking about doing that? Yes, Representative Bogert, please.
Just a point of clarification for my understanding. If Winnisquam's accepted, then we're looking at making the capital budget $7 million more to take into account all the things we just discussed. And if Winnisquam fails, then that $7 million would come back from the capital and go back in as our projects that we wish to have.
No, what we're contemplating, and I'm sure Chris can say it more eloquently than I can, we're taking our wish list that we just agonized over, and part of the agony, because they are definite needs, and they fall in the same priorities that we have always passed out of here. Instead of keeping that as a wish list on the side and letting other places decide whether they agree with our wish list or not, we're going to move them over into the capital budget. And then in the event that Winnisquam was not funded, then our total request would be reduced by $7 million, plus or minus, plus. Am I correct?
Sort of. So
I'm close.
you are close. So you would pass a budget that the Senate would need to remove that piece related to the Winnisquam CTE. If they didn't do that, then it would stay at the number that you passed, that the House passed it at. But what I believe that the chair is suggesting is that if Winnisquam doesn't, the communities that need to vote on that don't get the numbers they need, the Senate will likely take it out. It becomes a kind of a non-discussed item. But what leaves behind is all the things that the House would like to have funded. And they are funded in your budget versus being on the wish list, which is that we hope you put it in for us, but we didn't fund it ourselves. So it maybe strengthens your debate when it comes time to look at your capital budget compared to what the Senate comes up with.
Representative Faulkner.
I think the other thing is if the Senate doesn't take it out, and it doesn't get done because it's a lack of local approval, the money never gets spent and it gets, it lapses and that never actually impacts the state budget.
I'd agree with that, but I'd also back you up one step in that you'd go to a committee, a conference, and you would ask to have it removed. So it would end up being removed by the time you got done with the legislative process.
Any other discussion? Okay.
poll?
I think we should do a straw poll that, if you're in agreement of the suggestion of bringing the items that we had listed, what were we, about 7 million? Where were we, Chris, on that?
Yeah, so it'd be 7.625 million. And just to remind the members, it would be the respiratory lab for 1.5 million. The balance of the critical maintenance for CCSNH for 1925, plus the IT infrastructure for CCSNH, which is 1.2. $1 million for the Connecticut Lakes, and then
Connecticut
$2
Lakes
million for the
being
DAS
roads,
paving.
Being the roads, correct?
Yeah, the Connecticut Lake
Okay.
paving the road project. So to
Thank
add
you.
to the 500 that you've already provided,
Thank you.
and that would get you the 7.625 million.
All right, does everyone understand? Yes, Representative Bogert.
That was line item 35 on the wish list. We took it from 1.5 million to 1 million.
So no, you're going to end up at 1.5 million. So right now in the amendment I handed out this morning, you had $500,000 in it. Your action today would bring it to fully funded at 1.5 million.
All right, everyone understand? Straw poll, if you're in favor of that, you signify by raising your hand. It shows the committee is unanimous. I appreciate the hard work that's been done by this committee. I think our position's strong. We will send it off to you, Chris, to work out the details.
So I will get a new amendment drafted and have it, I'll email it to the members over the weekend, hopefully tonight. So before you start celebrating, so that you can see what will come. I'll come in with hard copies on Monday morning. You meet at 10 o'clock to do any further work that you might need to do. And then if there's any issues with the amendment, let me know. And then at 11 o'clock, I believe you have your exec session on House Bill 25.
Yes, Representative Jack.
I have completed reviewing the lapse extension section in the draft amendment, and I find it correct.
Thank you.
Any other further questions? Okay, thank you. We will be back here on Monday morning.
It's again Monday morning at 10, right? Mr. Chairman,
Correct.
For the work session and 11 a.m. for the executive session.
It's, I know there's one person or so that's told us that they can't be here. I would really hope that we can put as many bodies in our chairs that day and, so that we can have yeah, we are certainly looking for, unanimous, and we will, talk to that point when we meet next. Thank you. Folks, if I can hold you for one moment, there is one other important item that we need to take care of. And it is the, item number 18, Winnipesaukee River Basin upgrade. We had discussed it and I thought we had taken a straw poll on it. This is the same, Chris, you want to take us through this? Item number 18, River Basin upgrade, $6,750,000.
So as the committee might recall, the Department of Environmental Services came in requesting this capital project. The department is the body that oversees the Winnipesaukee River Basin that serves, I believe it's 10 communities in the Lakes Region area. Excuse me. And those communities basically have all their waste come to a central point, which is the Winnipesaukee River Basin, and it's processed. These 10 communities have an advisory committee that the DES works with, and when they need to do capital work or operational work, they get approval from this advisory committee. So the department is indicated the advisory committee is aware of and has agreed to the $6.7 million in infrastructure improvements, having to do with pumping stations and lines, to move the material, getting those updated or fixed. So that's essentially what it is. Because it is other funds, the debt service will be paid for by the fees that are collected from the communities as it relates to the use of the Winnipesaukee River Basin system. So it doesn't impact the general fund bonds that you would be issuing.
Representative Cloutier.
Yes, I move that we put this into the capital budget, this amount, which is under, it's not in the general fund, I believe, and the total is $6,750,000, Winnipesaukee River Basin upgrade. I move we put it in.
Further discussion? Straw poll if you're in favor of that, and I apologize, I thought we'd put this in earlier. Shows unanimous. Chris, is there anything else the chairman might have forgot that we need to taken care of? Yeah.
No, I think that addresses everything that you had mentioned to me to
Okay.
remind you of.
All right. Thank you. All right. Well, we are done today with our work. Thank you.